Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Landon and Hope's situation in Limbo. Obviously, they're happy to be reunited. Obviously, catching up about the fact that, hey, I'm not dead. I'm back in the realm of the living, healing. But it's because I went toe to toe with a god. Wait, gods are real? Yeah, you got some of the story, but obviously some details have changed subsequently since Alaric left and everything. And they're having their happy reunion and everything, happy to just be with each other right now. But then the ferryman shows up and he's kicking Hope out because she doesn't belong here, because she is still alive. So her being here isn't right. So, because she's slowly getting better on the outside world. At least with the Alaric thing, he wasn't actively getting better. So that's kind of difference in those regards. So, but Hope, being who she is, kind of stubborn and headstrong, decides just to reap the ferryman, which obviously was going to be a temporary thing. If I've learned anything from Supernatural, you kind of can't reap death. I mean, you can, but there's always going to be someone to fill the void. But obviously, this world, it's like, no, the ferryman's just going to automatically come back. It's like, yeah, I might be in timeout for a little bit, but Hope is trying to figure out a way to not only get back herself, but also Landon, because her being here is only temporary, but she doesn't want to leave unless she's able to bring Landon with her. So, and obviously, Landon has heard a little bit about what Hope has been up to in the meantime, and so, but he says regardless of anything, he's always going to be on her side. And it's like, right, obviously having made his place here helping people, but also it's like, right, a lot of this happened because had some help. They go try and track down the necromancer, and the necromancer's like, oh, haha, and it's like, oh, he's happy to see Hope and Landon together, and you're like, what's this all about? And then he proceeds to bring Landon back to life. It's like, okay, you dick. It's like, right, because at first I was like, oh, you're doing this just to spite Hope, but it turns out it was his plan the entire time, because his real plan was trying to get with Landon's mom, and just Hope is like, ew, that's gross, because he's like, yeah, the only person that's ever made me feel anything is Landon's mom. It's like, oh, and I needed to get that pipsqueak out of the way while we become family. But Hope's like, you do know that his mom went to peace, right? And the necromancer's like, wait, what? No, this can't be true. It's like, yeah, you missed your opportunity, which is so heartbreaking. He didn't really have much of a time because they didn't really interact. Maybe it was one of those things like in between the episode, like in between, like, you know, commercial breaks and stuff. We didn't get to see it on screen, but maybe they did interact and stuff. I mean, I think that would have been really weird and really interesting if it would have been a thing of, hey, I'm your new stepdaddy. Oh, the necromancer. At least if it was Ted, it'd still be weird, but at the very least you'd feel better about it. But the fact is that it would be the necromancer. I don't know. But it's kind of a moot point at this time because she's already moved on to peace. But he also kind of gets the enjoyment of, well, at the very least, I sent him back to that world. You're dead and you're stuck here, so yay, victory for me. It's like, yeah, but you're the necromancer. You can tell if someone's dead, right? Do I feel dead to you? Oh, cool. So I'm not. So I get to just, you know, find my way back to Landon. Thanks to you, he's back in the real world. I mean, back in the world of the living. So I don't have to worry about, like, finding a way back for him and me. I just have to find a way back for me. So thanks a lot, Ted. And he's just kind of, I think, he screams out Landon's mom's name. You're like, oh, you poor bastard. But Hope's plan doesn't work out because, well, Landon was in the real world for a little bit. And I was like, oh, is he going to kind of do a little bit of a Hope situation where, well, Landon and Ted were going to kind of do that too, of not saying anything when they got back, well, debating whether they were going to or not, because of the djinn. But then there's also the situation, I was almost like, right, when Hope came back from Malivore, she never came back directly to everyone, so I was curious, was Landon going to do the same thing? But the opportunity was taken from him because the ferryman shows up and grabs him. And so now it's a situation of he's back, and I love that the ferryman's holding on to him and telling Hope to go, and he's like, all right, let me go, you're choking me. But Landon's like, this isn't where you're supposed to be back there, which Hope's like, I'm not listening to you. Because she even apologized to Fairman. She's like, sorry, I kind of lose myself a little bit when it comes to Landon. And it is just this sad perpetual cycle. Like, like, everyone's relationship-wise over the course of these series have always had their ups and downs when it came to their relationships. I feel like there's never been one as complicated and would tumultuous be the right word? I don't know. For Landon and Hope. It's always like, right, destiny's always getting away, pulling them apart. We get brought together just to be pulled apart. And I almost thought it was like interesting because like the entirety of season 3 was almost all about letting Landon go. And she finally had to when she ended up killing him at the beginning of not beginning, but earlier in the season. So she had to let him go in that regard. And obviously that had kind of disastrous results because her humanity got flipped off. And now it's a situation of things are a little different this time. It's not going to be a humanity switch off, but it is a thing of, right, you need to go back because they can't win this fight without you. Because our Ken is coming for you. And if you're not up and about 100%, the rest of the school is going to do whatever it takes to fight and protect you. So, despite what they both want, she's always had this destiny in front of her. That's always been a thing of Landon hoped that it would involve being with her, but he might not be able to be with her, but he knows where he's supposed to be at least now, because he thought like, right, I thought like our destinies. Your destiny, I thought we were like so similar, but here we are in kind of these diverging paths yet again. And it's just, once again, Hope has to let him go. And that's always been this hard lesson she's never been able to do because she's always gone so far above and beyond. Maybe it's young love. Maybe it's, after everything she lost, finding love, like, you never want to let that go again. And it's just like, regardless of everything, she still ended up losing him, in some regards by her own hands. But I think this is the first time Hope actively kind of let him go, kind of her own accord. Yes, the circumstances kind of pushed into this, but it's still like her kind of actively doing it. But she promises that she'll never, ever forget him. And now the shoe is on the other foot where she had to stab him to save the day. He has to stab her with a scythe to save the day. So they kind of have to let each other go. But the problem is when Landon's like, okay, so I did what you wanted me to do, but why am I still here? Why did you didn't go after Alaric when he went back to the world of living, so why me? Well, turns out the Jinn kind of middle fingered everybody because somehow, and I don't know why the ferryman accepted it, maybe because there's some special extenuating circumstances, but basically the contract says that now that the Jinny goes to peace, Ted and I think Alaric are kind of a little free of the contract except for Landon, because Landon, his soul belongs to the ferryman now in perpetuity, which Ted's just laughing at it because it's like, right, here you are helping everyone else, trying to get them to peace and everything, and you help get Hope back to where she needs to be in the world of the living, and you get the most screwed over by everything. So, and I'm wondering why the ferryman would accept that situation, but I guess it's because maybe Landon's soul is worth a lot more in the grand scheme of things, like in a universal sense, than the Jinn's or something. Not unless I'm misunderstanding that situation, but it's like, right, that's what the new contract is for. So I wonder, is it because maybe they're setting it up for Landon to be, like, I was wondering, like, are they going to try and make him the new ferryman, like he's trying to pass the torch? That's why, because of what Landon's doing, Landon's kind of got a different approach to things than the ferryman himself. I don't know. I'm curious to see where that storyline goes. Now he's like, right, there's no going back, to life, because even if he goes back, he'll always be dragged back here. There's no going to peace for him regardless, too, so question then becomes, what happens to the story, What's Ted going to do now? So many interesting questions on that front. Tying that all in, we have the whole situation with Alaric talking to Ben. Ben trying to make up for the past is like, right, I'm going to help you kill my father, but the only thing that can kill a god is another god. So, but Alaric's not really sure whether he can trust Ben or not, but it's like, right, we're both desperate because Ben wants to, at the very least, he thought if he did all of this, he does hate his father, but he thought he did what he did for love, which Alaric's like, hey, you're down bad, which, he knows that better than anyone being in that situation because he was down bad for Caroline. So he understands more so than anything, making these choices, especially later on when he finds out, hey, you're trying to self-sacrifice yourself because if the magic is removed from you that makes you a god, it will kill you because basically all your organs would fail. I almost was wondering whether or not, I was like, because at first they mentioned that, I was like, oh, is it going to be like would it end up being like when the travelers put that barrier around Mystic Falls, that the moment you cross the lines, every bit of magic in your body would drain away, and so everyone started dying of the respective ways they died. I always forget which one, but Damon and Stefan respectively drowned, or they suddenly, one would start drowning because that's how the other one died. And was it them? Because I know one died from a gunshot wound, I think. For example, Tyler went across the barrier and his neck snapped because that's how he died, to become a hybrid and stuff. So I was almost wondering if that was going to be the same principle here of all the magic draining out of you, how you originally died was going to spark up again, considering but I guess the parallel still could exist because it's right, you've died so many times, so the moment all the magic's taken from you, all those deaths pretty much are going to catch up with you. I guess it's still the principle behind it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But Ben, as he feels like he's died countless deaths that were meaningless. This gives him an opportunity to die for something, if it means stopping his father and protecting other people. But Alaric isn't about, he's like, right, we've all know that self-sacrifice martyrdom, it rarely works out. There have been instances of, yes, it does work out, but I'm sure there's still ripple effects to it. But it still very rarely works out, especially in this show, because it kind of backfires to some extent. So Alaric is about trying to find another way. It's right, here are your students, about the self-sacrifice themselves. And Alaric's yeah, but the difference is that, what was it? I think it was basically right, when you're fighting for something you love and you want to protect, and you're kind of going at it together, then even if it's just a small chance, it gives you some chance of hope that everything will work out. Which even Ben's that's pretty optimistic of it. He's yeah, the fact is, the old me would have jumped at the opportunity to kill you if it means kind of settling all this, but Alaric likes the new person that he's become, and he doesn't want to go back to who he was before. So I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect to it. So their chances of winning were very slim, but with Hope back, it raises the stakes. They had a 5% chance of winning before. Now it's increased a little bit more now that Hope's back on the field as well. So got to come up with a strategy yet again how to handle this. I mean, granted, some of the board is what it was before, because they do have Lizzie on their side this time. But, they pretty much, I'm sure they're not really quite sure where Aurora stands on the board, but I'm sure they could probably go, we can probably account on where her allegiances will stand. Which, it was interesting when Ken came to her and it was this whole back and forth thing that they had. I guess there are these very kindred spirits of locked away by people that you cared about. In her particular case, the complicated relationship she's had with the Michelson family, in particular Klaus. She even said, I know what it's like to kind of be swept up by a charming, sociopath, powerful sociopath. So, so it's almost like history's repeating itself to some extent. It is interesting how that a lot of these dynamics do kind of repeat in this universe, just kind of almost wink and nods and homages to some extent, but it's also part of everyone's story. In her case, it's right, my situation with Klaus is why I'm hell bent on getting revenge on the Michelsons, why I'm going after Hope in the first place. But her and Ken kind of hit it off, but she's also right, how can I 100% trust you? But she's trying to figure out, right, she wants revenge, and even Ken's right, it's going to fill that void in you by getting revenge. You can't tell me that you won't feel better by doing it. But for her, it's am I really caught in this cycle? She wonders, right, and am I really, did my brother have my best interest, or was it just another manipulation on his front? Now she's questioning, a lot of that. Her devotion and love for her brother was so unwavered before, but now, spending time with Lizzie has kind of made her question, was my relationship with my brother very toxic? And yes, it was. She had, I think it's not the same, but there's hints of a similar, codependency between Josie and Lizzie. Like, I think Lizzie could sabotage a lot of stuff for Josie just to kind of make it so that Josie was there for him. I think Tristan borderline did the same thing for Aurora. It's like, right, you need me, you depend on me, like, you're kind of lost without me. I'm your other half, so on and so forth. But when the time comes, Ken will give her anything she wants, and she wants her brother back, but he says he can't do that. More actually, it's he could do it, but chooses not to, as he says later on. I love his attempt to try and apologize to her. It was him just like coming down like Thor with a lightning bolt, but it was just him being like, oh, I wanted to apologize to you because I've heard your story, and it turns out your brother, is he really worth having a second chance? Which Aurora's like, you having all I've heard from your children about you, can you really say that you deserve a second chance? So it's hypocritical. But for him, it's, yeah, you've heard their story. Yeah, you viewed Ben's story, but that's also from his perspective. You haven't seen my story, so let me show you the truth behind everything from my point of view, and maybe that in turn will give her some insight into how she wants to handle the Tristan thing, which it does. But going into his mind, which was almost that very like, oh my, when he like picks her up and like holds her up, and it's just like, ooh, wowzers. I also was thinking this the entire time, like, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Rebecca Breeds, the actress who plays, because I looked it up before, it was like, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm fairly certain, I'm like 80% sure, she's Australian, so it's funny because like Luke Mitchell, which once again, I never initially knew this, but it was like, when did I find out? Maybe sometime during Blind Spot I found out that he was Australian, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Never would have guessed. So I was like, hey, two Aussies together, that's pretty dope. I just couldn't help but think that the entire like time between some of their scenes. But we never got to see what he showed her, but it seems that it is the different perspective, that everything he did because he knew the threat of what Malivore was. So yes, I conquer the world in a means of protecting my family. And yes, it may have seemed like cruelty, but I mean, it's just kind of like Klaus. Klaus was very misguided. He loved his family, but it was also like a lot of inner stuff inside of himself that kind of made him like, right, he was afraid his family would reject him in any shape or form, so he'd rather like have such complete dominance and control of him, because if, considering the abusive father situation that he had with Michael growing up, that it just, he never thought he deserved love, and he always felt like, family's the most important thing, so he was afraid to ever lose that love, that they would never love him unconditionally. So that was kind of their cycle. And so it seems like Ken's is similar but quite different. And he's like, right, I thought that what I had to worry about was Malivore, but what I really needed to worry about was the deception of my own daughter. She locked me and the rest of her siblings up. So, and obviously both him and Aurora understand that loneliness, that believing that you're destined to be lonely and to wake up in a world that's so different. And so he, it seems like it's more so warrior pride, not necessarily that he views her 100% as a threat, but here's a being who is so powerful that she still can be a hindrance because there's nothing else like her in existence, which, was very much like Malivore. So, and what kind of threat he proved, granted, he was a bit of a different threat. And so Ken wants to challenge her, and so it comes down to what Aurora is going to do, and she decides to choose a path and stick with it. So she's going to help Ken kill Hope, and is like, right, we're going to stick this path all the way through, and it's going to be trial by combat, which Ken's all about, because he is, kind of a warrior, so it's like, right, we'll settle this way, which I guess for him is the only way. At least he's not trying to, I don't think he's going to try and go about it some dirty tactic way. Maybe he will, but it seems like he's going to straight up be like, no, let's fight and duke this out. So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. But they had to seal the deal with a kiss, which, interesting. Hopefully Ken doesn't turn out to be the right bastard everyone else kind of paints him to be, because I'd hate for, I was about to call her Rebecca by her real name, but I hope that Aurora doesn't end up getting caught in that cycle again, like the Klaus situation. Hopefully, like, I don't know if there's going to be a happy ending because it depends on how this whole fight turns out. So you'd almost hope that there was some happy ending in that regard. Like after everything Aurora's kind of been through, she deserves some happiness, you know. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. And then finally, we had the whole Ethan situation. MG and Lizzie are working together to try and figure out what Ethan's whole circumstance is, why he keeps phasing. I even love that he's standing there and he kind of phases out of his shirt and just kind of covers himself up a little. It's awkward. Especially because, right, we're talking about the two people that like Lizzie, and Lizzie likes these two people in front of her. So, you know, that complicates things. But Lizzie could tell something was bothering MG, but he's like, no, I'm fine. She's like, no, you're not. In fact, she made a list of things and she even says they're in like particular order. She only got down to like 60 something on a list of like 100 or something. 100 plus or something, like all the things she's ever, like the things that MG could be mad at her about. And at the same time this is all happening, they're testing out the creature that Ethan is getting his powers from. Once again, this thing is only like half of what he is, but most of his, well, because I thought the question was like, I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, I thought Ethan was mixed with something else too. I mean, like he's part human and he's part that thing, but I thought there was still some other piece to the puzzle too. Maybe not. I could have sworn that was the thing of like, oh, we still don't know the other part of what I am. But I guess it's like, no, maybe he's all that. Maybe that was just a misconception on my part, misunderstanding rather. So they're going to try and test out this thing's powers, you know, playing fetch. And depending on how far it goes, like how long it takes to use its power and how long it has to recharge afterwards. But it gave Lizzie and MG some time to talk. But for him, what really does bother him, he finally admits, is that she doesn't even recognize what pissed him off. But they ultimately find out the sad truth of that little guy dies, which even MG was like, right, its body kind of dissolved, so at least I don't have to bury it and try and hide it from Pedro. And it's like, oh yeah, Pedro really liked it. Oh, that sucks. Poor guy. You're like, that's so, because despite everything, it's like, there's actually some kind of cuteness to it, you know, and like a almost weird, it reminds you like a monster from a video game, like a fantasy video game, but it also kind of makes me think of a Pokemon in a weird way. But I felt bad for the little guy. It's like, oh, the school doesn't have a mascot anymore. That sucks. But Lizzie ended up doing some work and found out that those creatures have a shortened lifespan. The more they use their power, the more it eats away at their life force. So I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Dual edge ability, and that's why Ethan's been pushing himself, because they've never been able to really know what the thing is, that they haven't really studied it until now to know the full extent of Ethan's powers. So like the more, and every time he's using it, he's killing himself more and more. God, there's so many. God, I don't remember what this series is called. It's based on a video game that was adapted into a manga, because it's like a light novel. It's a visual novel kind of dating sim. God, what was it like? I think it's Tsukiyomi. Is it? Like the main character can he has this special ability that he can cut through death lines or something like that, and like the death lines of I forgot. Like his whole deal is he can cut through them, but the more he uses the ability, the more it drains away at his own life. So it's deadly to continue using it. It kind of reminds me of that. There's plenty of examples of the more you use something, the more it's going to kill you in turn. I mean, I guess you could look at like another anime references like Luffy's Gear Second, how that started off being like, yeah, don't use that too often because it will kill you, but he kind of trained his way around that. So it doesn't seem like Ethan has that option, so that kind of sucks, especially after MG and Lizzie finally had that conversation of what he was going to talk to her about. What bothered him the most isn't that Lizzie did what she did. What bothered him the most was that Lizzie went to Ethan first. It's like, he's like, I've always cared so much about you, and like when that time came, like I might not have agreed with you, but the fact is you still went to Ethan first rather than me. Because for him, it's like, regardless of anything you've ever done and you ever do, I will always love you with my heart and soul. Which you're part of, you're like, oh God, this is gonna be one of those things. It's not gonna be Elena and Damon. This is gonna be Carolyn. Caroline and Stefan, isn't it? You're like, he's probably going to be the one that dies. But then also, like, the thing is, we now know Ethan's on a shorter time frame, but I think he's probably going to sacrifice himself in the long run, which is like heartbreaking considering like, right, his mom and his sister, like what are they going to do if he dies? Like MG would have to probably compel them, or MG and maybe Lizzie would have to compel them to think something else happened to Ethan. But because the complicated thing is, and even he says it, I completely forgot, because I brought it up before, Olivia Leong's character. I completely forgot her name until they said this episode. I was like, yeah, Alicia. And I was like, right. I was like, man, I kept forgetting that. Because it's been so long now. But for him, it's like, right, every time there's always been something, whether it's been Sebastian, whether it's been Alicia, whether it's Malivore, there's always something that's kind of gotten in the way of something happening between them. But it's like, right, I'm just going to confess how I feel. This is, I think for so long he held off on how he felt. Like Lizzie knew, I think, but this is like the first like full-blown confession he's ever had. And so, and now something else is popping up, the whole Ethan thing. So now they have to stop Ethan from using his powers, you know. Maybe, you know, as long as he doesn't use his power, maybe he gets to live a normal, like, human enough lifespan. Who knows if enough of his, like, whether or not having used his powers the way it has already shortened it. Like, he'll die continually in using it, but what if it's already shortened it? So, like, say he would naturally live to be, like, 84. What if because of his continuous use, he's down to 66 at this point? You know, that he'll only live till 62, or, you know, is it an all at once thing, or is it, I'm curious like how the scaling works on that. Would it shorten his lifespan, or is it just like, yeah, just he can live normal human lifespan just as long as he doesn't use his powers anymore? So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all plays out going forward too, and what that means. Once again, kind of the love triangle between MG, Lizzie, and Ethan, but they also made the deal like, you know, if it's time for either one of them to die, they'll just make sure it's not Lizzie. And I think once again they're setting up that it'll be potentially Ethan, but they might swerve on you and make it MG just because of where things stand. Once again, we'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.